Hello, everybody. Welcome. I'm so glad you all could be with us today. Let's make sure we're okay. Fantastic. So, hi, my name is Nicole Rademacher. I am the founder and director of Acogedor. And I want to invite you to the second session for the Invisibilities conversation. I'm super excited to have Enrique Castrejon and Chuck Hong and Trey kato-kiriyama joining us today. There's, as with all the talks with the Invisibilities, we're touching on sensitive subjects. Today, part of what we'll be talking about is mental health, mental illness, and the stigma around that, among other things like geopolitical immigrations and migrations, and then also queerness and walking as a queer body in this world. But as far as the mental health piece, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that we will be speaking from our own experiences. None of this is meant to be medical advice. The conversation is meant to destigmatize the mental illness. If you are in crisis, we urge you to seek medical advice. And if you are thinking of hurting yourself or others, to please call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-8255. And I'm going to put it in the chat. And then if there is a medical emergency, please call 911. So I'm going to invite each of them to give a short intro of who they are and how they experience the world. First, I want to invite Enrique to say a little bit about himself.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for letting me participate. Enrique Castrejon, I'm 48 years old. I reside here in Los Angeles. I create artworks of measured images, installations, and I love to measure. I measure everything I see, and I do that to, one, quantify an image, question the image, and also break down an image into its basic units. It's a way for me to understand and to make sense of the world, and also to question what we see. Since we're bombarded by many images, I like to break them down to see what is truth, what's real, what's not, since we're constantly seeing so many different things that we become desensitized and we can't sense or sometimes tell what is real, what is not. So I create these works in order to break them down. My interest in participating in the panel has to do with hidden identities, primarily. For me, my experience of being undocumented for really 1978 to 1989. So primarily my youth and my teenage years, as well as the hidden identity of sexual orientation during my teenage years, and the mental health diagnosis thereafter of basically just trying to figure out what was happening and what was going in my mind mentally. In addition, also the stigma surrounding a lot of these hidden identities, and also how, as a result of these, how do I find my own authentic self and hold space and sense of worth, and being able to actually do a lot of these things that I've been told, and have created a sense of an ideology to abide by, and how to break those to be myself and to really love myself.
Thanks, Enrique. Chuck, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Chuck, and I'm 33, almost 34 years old. And I do a lot of different things. So I used to do a lot of printmaking, but then realized out of 3 instructors or printmakers that I know, 2 of them got cancer. I kind of stopped on it for a while, and I make some videos, but nowadays I'm mostly focused on making like fiber art. So I make teddy bears. Also, I started making hanbok, which is traditional Korean clothes, but it's made with something that's less precious of a material, because traditionally, or at least in Korea, it's usually just worn for like celebration, like special days. So it's all made out of silk or something like that. So it's kind of expensive material wise, and you have to kind of dry clean it every time you wear it. So I made it with kind of cotton, so it'll be worn daily. And it's kind of fascinating. Like, one of the questions that I had, or like that was rose while I was going to school in Pasadena, was some people couldn't see me from my work. What does that mean? I mean, at the moment I was focused on what's that vanitas. So I grew up in Catholic family, and that was more impactful in my life at the moment than my queerness or than me being Asian. But clearly I wasn't doing thing that was expected, and it rose some questions from people. And I don't know, like about 8 years later now, I feel like I'm finally going back at like my roots and how I was growing up, because right now I live in Glendale, but I was born in Long Beach, California. And when I was about 2, my family moved back to Korea, and I was growing up there till I was 16. Thing is, since my parents were kind of young when they moved here, they learned some things like from this culture and brought it back to Korea without us even knowing it. So growing up in that family household, I must have something different from traditional Korean value. So my very last year of living in Korea, one of my dear friends actually asked me, "So when did you move back to Korea? Maybe from Los Angeles?" So there's a stigma in Korea of having dual citizenship, especially for male, because it's a draft now. Like, Korea's still in a war, so you just have to go to the army if you're a guy. And there's like people thinking if you have dual citizenship, you can just drop Korean citizenship and then just like go back to the country that you have another citizenship to. So it's not a good thing. So I didn't really tell anyone about me born in US and living in Korea. And it's just a public school too. So I kind of asked him like, "Hey, how did you know?" And he was kind of casually saying like, "Well, you're different." And moving back to US, was the same deal. Like, I couldn't really hang out with first generation Korean people, because to them I'm too whitewashed, and to the second or third gen Koreans I'm too fob, like fresh off the boat. So there was always a sense of like me being nomad. Like, I wasn't really feeling too fitted into any of the groups that I want to be part of. And I think it was my queerness that I finally feel comfortable and became my skin. And then now I'm living with my chosen family with 2 gay dads and twins, and now I'm being their Korean grandma. I guess that's the end of my intro. I'm grandma.
Well, thank you, Korean grandma Chuck. Trey, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for having us. I was sharing earlier that I feel so tender today. I don't get to, have this kind of specific space or conversation much. And then especially with the thought of people watching, right? So my name is Traci Kato-Kiriyama. My pronouns are she and they. You can call me TKK or Trey. Most of my work is in theater and the literary arts. So I think in terms of poetry, which is a lot of my focus right now because I'm finishing up some editing or a lot of editing on a manuscript of poetry. I'm in like the final weeks before the final pages and edits are due. And we're looking to release in May of 2021. And I was thinking about sort of the dynamics of work in relation to, you know, feelings of intimacy. And a lot of my theatrical work tends to be, you know, big, larger, right? Large scale projections, multiple disciplines in performance, you know, plays that incorporate my stage partner's practice as an aerial artist, you know, so a lot of circus, right? And I think now that I'm just really immersed again in my book process, I think a lot about like these really sort of intimate spaces. And I think generally my work, I feel like my perspective is that, you know, the personal is political and the political is personal. And then sometimes it just feels like the personal is personal. And then later it ends up being political anyway. And I've been working on this book for really off and on like 8 years, which is a really long time, right? I was offered this publishing back in like 2012, and I started working on it in 2013. And a lot of times I tell people, and this is true, this part is true, like there have been a lot of stops and starts because of life, right? It's an independent publishing company. There was no advance, right? And I love the work that I do, so it's hard for me to say no. And so I say yes to a lot of things. It makes me a very busy person. I'm a community organizer as well. I take that as an honor and a privilege. It makes me a very busy person. And so there's a lot of stuff where I literally had to just like work on it in bits and pieces, or certain months or certain seasons, right? But the other part of that that's very real is that there were also a lot of psychological stops for me. It was, some of the material I was entering was very close to trauma that my mom was going through, and then was, you know, sort of sharing with me as sort of her only confidant. And I was writing into it. And usually my mom with my art, she's always said, you know, nothing you do surprises me anymore. Nothing you do shocks me anymore. So it was coming time to me sort of to that moment of saying to her again, hey, you know, some of this is going to be personal. You know, what do you think? You know, expecting like, you know, nothing you do shocks me anymore. And I told her it was going, some of it was, what was coming out was about, you know, this really tough time that she was going through, facing a lot of pain. And, you know, again, communicating that to me in things that she was feeling about that. And she said, well, write about whatever you want, just don't write about me. And I was like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. Fuck. And
there goes the book.
There goes the book. That was 2014. And then that was the end of 2014. And a couple months later, at the beginning of 2015, I started to have very sharp pain in my elbows, at my elbow and my wrist. And I mean, it was so severe, and I never had anything physical like that in this area. And so I was, you know, with a Reiki practitioner, Reiki master, and we were kind of going through this. I was talking about the trauma. I was talking about its relation to my father's death, but other things that came out after his death, and, you know, my mom's pain. But I don't know why I'm having these physical things. And the Reiki master was like, well, you just talked about all kinds of stuff directly related to your parents and a loss of one of them and a trauma with one of them and your mom is your mom. We are all tied. There's a spiritual umbilical cord that we can never get rid of. And so, you know, I was seeing how I was thinking very differently, or I had to think very differently about my art all of a sudden, in ways that I hadn't my whole adult life. So it's just been a matter of, I think ever since then, the past 4 years, just kind of picking back up the pieces and writing into the pain of writing. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I've had to extricate a lot of content and focus it differently. And it came out to be where I started to write more notes to self in between pieces of poetry, and ways in which I'm talking to myself about like assurances, right?
Mm-hmm.
That it's okay, and like I have to trust the process, I have to trust myself, and I will never hurt her.
Yeah.
Even if that means waiting on certain pieces till much later. Another time, right? So that's a little bit on my work.
Well, thank you, Trey, and thank you all three of you. There's a couple things before I move forward. First, I want to acknowledge Anu and Umi in the chat. Said, yay, Chosen Family is great. Yay for Chosen Family. So some nice validation and encouragement from the people watching the live stream. And I do want to acknowledge the space that we are going to enter in. And my job will be to hold that space. And I would like us just to do a quick 3 breaths before we start, just to ground us. So make yourself comfortable. And of course, the people at home, you're invited to do the same. I think that grounding is always something that can help us move through our days. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. We're going to do 3 breaths. It's going to go in through your nose for 4 counts. We're going to hold for 4 counts, and then out through your mouth for 8 counts. So the first breath, in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Second breath, in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last one, in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When you feel ready, open your eyes. So I'm going to put this to any of you. And, let's just make it real. How are we coping mental health-wise as we're in, I think, month 8 of a safer at home mandate and in the middle of a new surge?
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
I was like chilling and active and like feeling good, like deriving, I think, like sort of silver linings, right, of safer at home, that aspect, just the safer at home portion. Feeling really grateful to have a space with my really amazing partner and us not driving each other nuts, and like just like every day I feel like we're always like, wow, we're lucky because we just have many people around us that it's a challenging time. People are getting divorced and like all this stuff, and we're just like, gosh, we're really lucky, and I'm so thankful. And I don't know, somewhere around month 6, I think, this one week I was seeing a lot of friends online in what, for some reason, like these conversations where we were reflecting on like the past many years. And then I got into one conversation in particular with some friends who have a restaurant in historic Filipino town called the Park's Finest, and they were going to be featured on Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives again, and we were doing a pre-show conversation. So I was like really going in and like asking them to really like dive back into their history and how they started this program called Feeding the Frontliners at the start of the pandemic lockdown. And, you know, really at a scary moment when they thought they would have to shutter their doors, they figured out a new way to survive while still helping people out in the world through their meals and serving food. And so because they're so busy, and I think I was asking these questions about reflection, you know, everybody's in tears, like they're all crying, we're all crying. And after that call, like later that night, it just kind of hit me that I'm just not running into people. Like in Little Tokyo, you run into people, you know, all the time, right? In all the work that we do in public spaces, you run into people all the time. You have awesome conversations after the shows, and, you know, and I just was like, oh my God, I think my friendships are all getting damaged. And I was like, I just started bawling. And my partner was like, oh no. I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not seeing anybody. And I try when I can to text some people to see how they are or send love. But, you know, it's just completely different. And for the most part, I just feel so out of the loop with so many dear people to me. What's going on with them and what are they doing? And I can only go on IG for so long to see how they're doing before I get exhausted and tired. And so I think that's where I still kind of am, still I'm thinking about like, what is this transition period? But now we're in a second wave. So, you know, how I'm thinking a lot about how I can have some meaningful moments with some friends, even if it's from their sidewalk or something. So Umi listening in today is one of those people who I miss dearly. So I'm so glad they're here with us.
Yay.
Well, I was interrupting Trey, so sorry. But it's been insane. I used to work for, well, still am working for retail. And of course, like it just cut for like a good 2-3 weeks. And then they found a way to do it like 2-person in the, you know, entire building, and it's not open to public, and we're just shipping items from the store. So some changes, and, you know, like you still like see different people reacting it differently. So it was kind of like I'm still more than like 6 feet like apart from other people, and even though places now like widely open, I'm still working the back on my own. I just told like the person, like manager, like I don't want to deal with human being. Like I don't know if they're like being a flag red or just like, you know, not being, you know, safe. But it's I've always been kind of like introvert, and again last few years I've been mostly just like going to work part-time and then come home and take care of the kids and like garden if I have time. Like, so it's nothing was changed too much. And then sometimes the news like hit me. I was just talking to my good friend like not too long ago, and he was mentioning like his entire family got COVID.
Wow.
Everyone's fine now, I think, but those newses, and my old neighbor's parents got, well, he passed away. So it's just little things that reminds you like not to be cheesy $5 words on like Hallmark card, but it's good to be reminded how lucky I am, and things that I have, I don't feel like I earned it. I feel like I was granted with. So it's just humbling moments, weirdly positive. And even with the second wave, yes, I'm kind of like, I'll just be extra careful. But it's been really strange. It's hitting me hard like here and there while I'm still in a la la land. Like, I'm going to make art. But at the same time, like, hey, people are literally dying in waves. Like, you know, strange times. Yeah.
Well, for me, I just moved into a new apartment during this time period. So 2 months now in, I'm pretty much by myself. But previous to this and before the pandemic occurred and shelter in place, I was living with my sister in a home in West Hills. Now being by myself, to then before being with at least six individuals in a house. Luckily we were able to coexist. We weren't getting on each other's nerves, but it was a sense of family, which was really wonderful to have. And then even being now, having more aware of our own experience there, and knowing that we had to coexist, being able to manage living together, but and also being able to create work during that time period was also beautiful, because it was also a way for my family to look and see what I was doing. Because my sister allowed me to use the living room. That's where I was actually staying, and be able to use it to create some work, because she knew that I needed some space. And it was wonderful because it was one of the first times that my family got a bit of a insight to what I do as an artist. Because before I was living, in a different place, studio somewhere else, and they never had the opportunity to really watch me just create and then ask questions. My mother coming up and asking me what I'm doing, or my sister, or of course them giving me suggestions on how do I do it. But in all, it was wonderful to be able to just have and hold that space and share that space of creativity, and also to be there for them, because my father is also sick, and they're older. I was very concerned about leaving the house for a period of time, because I just did not want to put them at risk, knowing how old they are, and also that they have conditions that can put them more at risk and put them in harm's way. But in a sense, I left because I knew that I needed to have my space, and also to create elsewhere, because I outgrew the living room. I basically took it over, and I needed to have them have more space in them for themselves. So now, being by myself, there is that sense of like longing to be with family again. I miss them, and and also to help out because of my parents being also ill, and that's something that is always behind the back of my head. But I'm managing to be able to just have a lot of Zoom connections with individuals, and I also am working remotely from home. So that's also been a structure. So I have a structure that has a schedule that has helped me to at least maintain a sense of order, a sense of understanding of, okay, I'm back in the house. I haven't left, have food, I have all that I need, but I need to just follow this schedule. And it's helped a lot to be able to have a sense of order. And then the drawings also help me sense of control, I guess, of an environment. So the measuring helps to ease kind of my sense of out of controlness. That's a word. But yeah, I'm managing it at this moment.
Can I just say that's so cool that your family, it's so cool for your family that they're getting to witness you. And
Yeah.
how neat is that they're verbalizing their questions and curiosities, right, about your process. That's so dope.
It's wonderful because sometimes my parents have no idea what I might be doing. They support me. I mean, in the beginning when I was going through art school, figuring out why it's interesting to see them being open, and then in essence coming full circle 360 degrees from what was before, when I was in these other situations where they were totally non-supportive, to now being embracing and being so there, not only as an artist, but as a queer man, single queer man when they're asking me, when are you getting married?
Mhm.
And it's wonderful to have those conversations and being able to be in that kind of household that is very supportive and aware. And of course, my mom is a very religious Catholic woman who, before the pandemic, was religiously going to church and had a previous perspective about me being gay. But now it's wonderful to be able to embrace this sense of change. And I think that's what has changed a lot of my own kind of mental health, that there's a sense of acceptance. But it's also the awareness too of how our bodies kind of betray us, and seeing age kind of pure my parents' bodies, and seeing illness also. And there's a sense of acceptance too about that, and using the time to be able to be with them. And this time period, the pandemic, was a bit of a silver lining for me with my family, to get to know them more, because before all this, I was pretty much absent with my family, absent from actually even having any really interactions. Or like when I would have shows, I would send them invitations, but knowing that they might not show up. But when they did, it was wonderful. And trying to actually connect with them in some way. So this time around, being able to have that opportunity to just give them a glimpse of what I do was really special for me. Really special. The only thing that I would say is it also depended on the drawings that I was doing, because some of them are very pornographic and homoerotic. And I remember doing a dildo and a butt plug.
And your mom's like, what's that?
What is it?
It's a Christmas tree. It's a Christmas tree.
Yeah. And I had to be cautious because I had to hide some of these, or do them really late at night, so I could still be, respectful to the household. But there was one time I was doing this object, and she just said, "I like it. I really like it." So it's interesting when you bring up, Trey, the aspect of personal and private, and the personal is political. Under these circumstances, sometimes it's just wonderful, with the personal is personal. And I'm thinking about that there was a time period when I was, very adamant, because I was rejected by my family in the 90s, and then going to college at Cal State Northridge and participating with I had a chosen family at that time that became these radical queer militant Queer Nation going participants. There was another organization called Squish that was organized at Cal State Northridge, and it stood for Strong Queers United in Stopping Heterosexism. And we staged all these demonstrations, and they became my family and became my let's say, my educational the knowledge of being able to stand up for oneself and being able to be vocal and be visible. And that was like taking myself from family, which was so personal and closed in, to now being thrown into this now whirlwind of like, let's fight, let's get to the streets in the 90s. And it's experiencing that, and then experiencing what's happening now, going back to family and being accepted. It's mind-blowing, and it's so wonderful because it brings a sense of closure to certain feelings that I had that was really traveling during that time period. So yeah.
I still invite my parents to shows.
Yeah.
And the most interesting compliments I got from my mom was last time when she showed up, she said, "Oh, so your teddy bears are kind of different looking, each individuals." That was the best compliment I got. I'm like, "Oh, you noticed?" So I was like super happy, like, "Oh, you finally noticed they have different body gestures and showing different languages, like body languages." And that was really big. And I think I told you guys like finally had a phone conversation with my family. Mom yelling, "I know you're rainbow," and started like bawling out, like crying. I'm like, yes. And she still asks me if I'm going to get married. Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe one day, but you know, like that's why I'm buying lottery tickets, so I'll have enough money to get myself, I don't know, someplace and get married. But hey, life goes on.
Yeah.
But it's really important. Like, my chosen family was definitely doing the same thing. Like, I was blessed enough to be like going to the college when the being gay wasn't even like a big deal. Of course, like some people would kind of throw like comments on here and there, but mostly like even the faculty members were like openly gay and all that, so they didn't even care. It's like, hey, like we're here and we're just here to educate you, and like you are just getting education, so it's not a big deal. And on top of that, like what my chosen family did was to make me feel comfortable about who I am. Like I was always conscious about like, hey, like I'm this weird person like making teddy bears at age like 28 or something at the moment, and then like, but I also want to start collecting bones, and like I love like making images that are not alive like these ones. So it just, you know, like allowing you to live in your own skin and to be absolute weirdo who you are, like was like almost like my wish granted. And now I, you know, became this like parental figure slash, again, grandma, is also like giving me different perspective about the world. Like I thought like my only goal was to have this art just pushed out of me and then be absolute worst mom slash dad and just like let them live, and just that's the end of my deal. But now I kind of feel like I somewhat have responsibility of like what I'm creating, because whatever I create might be the story that other people wanted to tell but couldn't tell on their own. So in a big sense of like being in a family and extending this like group of wonderful family that I didn't know existed, and having conversations with wonderful people like you guys, all of you, yay, makes me super happy, and honestly, truly like blessed to be here. I'm so excited. So, and you know, I don't think in the intro I talked about like, you know, what was going on, like at least mental health issues, like before I feel comfortable with myself, I always had like suicidal thoughts and the plans, like depends on the age. So started around like, I think 8 years old. I thought, you know, the world is not worth living. So age 20, I'll be gone. At 20, I finally got into school that I wanted to go to. So I'm like, you know what? I'll just see the end of this. Like 27 might be a good age because all this like famous people actually like themselves during like 27. So I'm just gonna join them if I became famous. 27, I don't know. I think I got into grad school around that time. So I'm like, I need to finish my thesis paper. Like this is not gonna help me out. So 7 years later, I'm still alive and happy, and it just takes a lot of courage to, and also support, like your mental support from the people you love and people you didn't love before, but then rediscover like the connect with them. Slowly but surely, I think everything and anything just helped, and also talking about it openly, it just sends, in a sense, like it creates again like you belong, and also there are help that is available. It is so hard to growing up in like, you know, traditional Korean family, like I reached out already when I was 14 to my parents saying like, hey, I think I'm very like depressed. I may want to get some help for myself because, you know, like this is not healthy. But the word exactly from my parents were like, we did not give birth to a crazy child. So you'll absolutely not get this. But, you know, it's just different views. And like, I do understand the frustration they might have. And of course, like I had, but just somehow talking about it and normalize it kind of makes me feel like it is not a big deal and it could be dealt with. So it's just, for some of us, like it is just part of us and even part of our creative process. So it just, you know, somehow balanced out in my life. And off tangent a lot, but yes, like I just want to express how happy I am to be here.
Thank you. I also want to share the, I would say the disclosure of depression or mental illness to family. I remember when I had gone through a very difficult time period in the early 2000s, seeking help through psychologists and a psychiatrist, disclosing this information to family and the sense of believing that this is happening or this is me, that I'm actually also crazy, or that I'm making it up, or that I'm being given these ideas to believe, and that this is not true, that you shouldn't be having this, you know, you have nothing in your life that, you know, you should be depressed about. So this sense of minimizing pain, minimizing what was going through my, you know, myself, my experience, and saying, you know, set it aside. And it's that minimizing, it's awful because it's just saying, you know, you shouldn't experience this, or that it doesn't exist, and that that shouldn't be complaining or having these feelings. And it was really confusing because you did not want to hurt your family, you did not want to seem weak, but it's something that I also grew up with family that did not like to disclose experiences themselves or share. So there's always a sense of distance, a sense of hiding. That was always hard, and to go ask for help was also very difficult during, you know, even my younger years, even as a kid. You know, having to hide my own sense of being undocumented for a while, and being told that you cannot disclose where you came from and how you crossed the border. You cannot disclose that because you have potential of putting the family in danger. And so you learn to hide, and that hiding also prevents you from just being yourself. So that added, I think, for my own experience, some weight, and almost like the sense of responsibility that if I did something wrong, that it would be my fault. So I always had to do my best to keep in line. It's hard when it comes to family and being open when you're trying to share with them something true that they can't believe you or don't want to deal with it.
It's a lot of burden, right? It's like we carry a lot of responsibility and a lot of burden. And I also think of like some of that burden, we're so gentle with it because we know we have to hold it with care. It's not resentment that we carry that burden, right? But it can be hard. It can be hard on us. I know, like, every time I shared as a younger adult with my mom that I was in therapy, I actually, you know, it's funny because I never really thought about this till right now, but I don't know if I ever told my dad. And find that curious. Because I never got to come out to my dad. And I think just in general, I probably didn't talk about very private, serious things with him. And he never really asked me, you know, I think he was of a generation that, you know, didn't have a lot of communication tools as a dad. And then he's like, you know, a second generation Japanese American guy, grew up as a greaser on the West Side, you know, and so like all the things that added up to, you know, he definitely was someone who did not want to go to therapy. And I remember one time when I told my mom that I was in therapy in my 20s, I'd never known this, but she said, oh, well, you know, I wanted to see somebody with your dad. And we went one time, and the therapist said we should get a divorce. And so we never went back. And you know, I found like every time I was willing to talk about my own therapy, she would give me a little tidbit, like a little thing about her experience of seeking it or trying it out. And then so many years later, I don't, it's like I almost don't know what happened in that, like when I tried to get her to go to therapy when she was at her, I think, most dangerous and lowest point, she just absolutely wouldn't do it. So I don't know, I just find these things like, you know, I felt like, yeah, one of my friends said to me, I just don't want you to, I don't want to see this, I don't want to see you get destroyed by this, like, be careful. And it was one of those things where I was like, but it's my mom, like, you know, whatever she needs to do, like I have to be there for her. You know what I mean? Even if it meant like me begging her to finally just go to one session with me and my therapist, which she did, right? But again, she never went again. So it's just it's so complicated. It's just very complicated. Everyone's relationship with seeking help and times where people feel it's okay and times where people feel it's not okay. Because maybe for her, marriage counseling was like acceptable, although not very talked about, but still acceptable. But then seeking it for herself in more of a dangerous psychological situation, it felt like it just wasn't, to her, she felt like it wasn't necessary.
It's incredible because you're making me think back to 2 years ago, where, you know, my mom finally went to a counselor. It had to do with a traumatic event where there was an accident. The motorcyclist was going very fast, going through red lights, and as my mom was making a left, this motorcyclist hit the car as they were going through that yellow red. You know, apparently passed away, and that really affected my mom so horribly. And as a result of that, she was able to go to a therapist to really resolve, you know, this traumatic event. And I think within that, it also allowed her to experience a sense of release of other things that may have actually been bottled up. And it was amazing to be able to see the sense of being able to process these things, and to become aware of like what therapy is, and to break also that sense of understanding, I think probably generationally, what it had meant in the past. And I think, I mean, see her now, I mean, there's a sense of relief that was available for her. But of course, there still was a sense of secrecy, and I respect that. And I know there's a connection of family trauma that may not be discussed, and I don't know if they will always discuss it with me, and that's okay. But it'd be wonderful to be able to have that shared connection, because, like you said, being able to help being able to be there for them, but also understanding from where they're coming, how that also affects my own mental health as well.
Like, so my maternal grandpa was definitely like sole survivor, I think, of his own family during Korean War. And I think he was also like a sole survivor of his platoon. So he would listen to like music, like I guess quite often at night, and he would just drink himself to sleep while crying. So during that time, the man shedding tears in Korea was definitely like big no-no thing. It was taken as a sign of weakness, and my mom would remember him as a weak person as well. But the thing is, that, I guess, again, like Trey's word, like that burden, and also like of the family has been somehow went into my mom, because honestly, one of the early memory of me seeking my mom after like coming from school is her sitting in a kitchen just crying. I'm trying to kind of make her feel better, but of course, like if you're in that space, like you cannot, like you are internally focusing on yourself. So I couldn't really give her any help or the sense of relief. So there's a little thing of like that. There's a word in Korean called han. So that's like the anger, anguish mixed with sadness, like deepened sadness. So if that concept is already established, and to like have personal life intermingled with it, and then to have that as a learned behavior from your parents, and then to like give it to the next generation, it's just, and because it was there, like even before you were born, you were there. Seeking help about this also feels like, to me at least, like cutting up the tie with my family in a way, in a weird way. Like, first of all, is this sadness, or is this like moments of instability learned behavior? So there's a like the question of authenticity of my mental like state. And second of all, is this like easily solvable with just going to the therapy? Like, what else should it be done for me to feel like, I don't know, like be okay with it? I don't even expect to be free from it, like just a coping mechanism. Like what is the option was also a question that I asked myself a lot. And like to have a conversation about this with my mother, who clearly said before, like, no one in my family is crazy. Like, how do you convince myself first that sentence is not true, and then like to have a human to human, like heart to heart conversation with my parents, who you saw as a strong figure who was raising you, and acknowledge their weakness, and then like to have it kind of like bring it out from them, and to kind of hold hand by hand and like go this journey together. I'm still working on it, honestly. Like my words almost means like very little to her endeavor, because on top of it, she moved to Korea, like, and then moved back to US, where she had little or no like recollection of language or the culture, and she had to get a job in downtown LA, where she it was 2000s too, but where she faced a lot of racism still. Mm-hmm. Downtown LA, who knew? But she would call names and call like by names, and then people would just kind of coming to her store where she was like working, and then kind of like start a fight just by her appearance. It's like, go back to your country was a thing that she would hear a lot on a daily, like pretty often. Like, so it's like all these different things, like just kind of as a, in its own weird balance of my mom's sanity and my own sanity. Like, where do you start? It's, I don't know. I know it's super heavy. I'm so sorry, but it's just like, I'm glad I'm not alone. But there's no like study that is written out for. I don't feel like there's no like specific study written out for all these things that is like personal, interpersonal, generational, all together bundled up with the like being an immigrant as well, like, you know, because for a while, even though they lived here, because we lived in Korea for so long, my dad's green card was canceled. So it was illegal, even with the kids who has like green card and like citizenship. So he had to wait till my sister turned 18 for her to like apply for his green card or like citizenship, and then like he had to like move different jobs, and like some of his bosses would actually like casually threaten him. It's like, hey, like, what if you are not like sitting here at all, ha ha, and then, you know, like freaking out and like have to deal with it. I mean, it's been solved now, so one less thing that's on our shoulder. But at the same time, I can imagine this being not like being quite common, at least in people who are like moving into and also like just living through daily lives in a way.
I'm curious to know, like, after what you both shared, actually, you know, your experience with your family and sort of your struggle with sort of being able to process it yourself, but then also like be supportive to your parents, right? And Enrique, when you were talking about sort of your mom's own kind of you know, risk to ask for help and reach out, and like I'm curious about like how does all of this stuff show up, or does it show up in your art? Like what ways in which, you know, because it.
Yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No,
I didn't mean to interrupt.
You know, what artists are in the process of processing.
Yeah.
So
apparently, with the work that I do, it's definitely very separate. You know, then we have to be honest with you. Though I was so absent in my family for an extended period of time because I was, I think, also afraid of them finding out about my own kind of partying that I was doing. You know, getting completely wasted during a certain time period, trying to just maintain a sense of sanity, that I pulled away. And the work that I do has been more separate in the sense of the personal, particularly family. I think if anything, the more current stuff that I'm creating at this moment really is delving into aspects of a family, whether it be illness, mental health, physical kind of aspects of the illness. And those are things that I'm dealing with it now, because previously it was almost like this separate thing. I mean, what was, I think, more apparent was my own kind of experience, my own experiences, what I would see, but bringing family in, I think there was also just safety to prevent any reveal. Like, for example, you know, my family's life, you know, is I don't know. I think that this whole aspect of hiding has kind of created a sense of learned behavior, learn of patterns to kind of keep certain things down and not be up and vocal. And I think that's something that I'm learning still, to be able to be okay with revealing certain other things. But that's I guess the process that I'm allowing it to unfold. Yeah.
For me, started making hanbok, like traditional Korean clothes, became in a process of rethinking about who I am as like, how am I being seen, at the same time like trying to go back to my roots, different stories that I grew up with. And there's a lot of like, it's a war-torn country, even though that's like more than half century ago. Like there's still people alive who has like, every family has story. So I'm just trying to start like kind of digging my own family stories, and I think giving a voice was somewhat important. Like the things that I would not think about. I recently just remembered, well, a year ago I started having a plan to talk about like this story. I'm not even sure if it was like my grandpa's story, or I read it somewhere and became my grandpa's story in my head, or like my grandma heard it somewhere and then like told me as his story, not sure. But the story of like his like my paternal grandpa's like survival in his platoon, like I'm trying to recreate it as like traditional Korean theater, but then I'm using the structure just from my head. Like I don't have any reference, but I grew up there and learned some of it, so I'm kind of recreating it. So it kind of going back to my root of me losing my Korean ground, but at the same time bringing my own family story. And then I literally a week ago I just remembered my father's side, there's a person who we just call like kunomani, which means just big mama, but in Northern Korean accent, like Northern Korean colloquial, because my father, like my grandpa, like paternal grandpa, is actually from North Korea. So his sister, who's this literally a huge lady, like she's like as tall as I am, I think. Well, at least when I was a kid, she was like super tall, really round, big figure. But it's after war, and they just all moved down from north, so they have nothing. So the way people shared their life was through food. So I just remembered like her dumpling soup. The the dumpling, like kyoja, like it looks like kyoja, but then the size was like of my face. And she would serve that on like New Year's Day, 2 of them each for kids as well. Like for if you're adult, you're getting 5. If you're kid, you're getting 2. There's a reason why she's called Big Mama. She could herself alone could finish the whole damn bowl, but like as a 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old kid, you're just like sitting in front of this like ginormous steaming bowl of mandu, which is like a meat dumpling thing, and then like you're trying to finish it, and you wonder like, can she just buy like the thing like dough that is being sold, like this tiny thing, and if you fold it and turn it into mandu kyoja, it's like this big. But she just started from the scratch, like her dough, and she was like making it, and poor her children, like she didn't care. She's like, you're gonna make it, it's 4:00 in the morning, people are visiting, sit down. So everyone's making it. It's like ginormous thing, like it looks like empanada. That's what it looks like. And it's like chowing down, and I'm barely finishing like one, and then my dad's like nudging on me like, finish it, you have to finish it. But the background is she would have been shared that with other people who actually fled the country. Like my mother's side parents, like in their entire town, he was the only one who was working for the government. So every summer he like, watermelon is super expensive, he would buy like the bulks of them, bring it, like the truck will have delivery. he would share that with every neighborhood, like kids and like family. Same as my big mama, like she would invite people from like who fled the north, have this ginormous big dishes that was hers, and that was their han, that was their sadness that they were sharing, but celebrating life. Later, she told I guess one of the cousins, and she used to have 2 daughters too, and she lost them during the war. So she became really rich at the end because she had like a bunch of land that she was using it as a ranch, like outskirt of Seoul, and then that became, the whole entire town became like a suburbia. So people bought all those land so she could just live comfortably. And then she told her own sons, saying, hey, I used to have daughters, and you're going to adopt girls if you want my money, because there are people who still needs help, and I need closure for my own daughters that's lost. So all those stories, like, I want to share, and then somehow, I don't know, it will become part of my art, like part of the voice that I want to share. It's slowly coming to me right now, as of now. Like before, even this year, like I didn't have time to think. I feel like I was just kind of like, if I can make something quick, I'll make something quick. And I still want to share some stories. Then I'll make teddy bears because it's a humanoid figure that can hold a gesture and you can kind of read the emotion. But now I want to talk and to the point that what was going on with my own family and my own self, and then it's slowly there, and I don't know what I'm gonna tell about my immediate family, like my parents or me and like my sisters, but one day someday will, hopefully soon, and hopefully, I don't know, I can kind of look at it and feel comfortable enough to say like, hey, like I gave birth to this and I'm just gonna like let it free now. Yeah.
I couldn't help but have 2 art thoughts. This is going to be random. But I just imagined when you were talking, like a huge teddy bear wearing a hanbok, eating a giant banduk, crying. You know, that very ubiquitous sort of like eating while crying. Anyway.
Yeah.
And then I had this much earlier, Enrique, I thought, have you talked about having to, like, when you're doing your dildo paintings, like having to do it late at night. And I don't know why, I was like, wow, I wonder what the difference would be, you painting a dildo late at night versus you painting a dildo in the morning. Like,
Right.
what might the difference be? I don't, you know, have you?
A bit of coffee, I think it would be better. But early morning, it'll be like, it's
Sunny and bright.
the energy. I have to kind of get into that like mode where you're on it. But early morning, it's, yeah. I mean, it works. I've done it, but it's just also, I guess, my sister's privacy. There's a sense of like being able to create a sense of privacy. And I think that's also my own kind of control of like, here I am doing my work. If I get interrupted, or if I get suggestions, why don't you use this color or use this, or you could do this. Now there's 6 individuals that will be walking through. So there was, although I do love the fact that there is an engagement there, or there was, and I would always take it as wonderful as an investment into my own work. And again, that's the sense of beauty of being with family. Sometimes they say the darndest things.
Oh my God.
My mom
So,
always gives me notes.
oh,
She's always like, that was good, but you missed a few things.
I mean,
But it's just, yeah.
we can have exhibition of like coffee and dildo and bear and mundu, and then all the notes that you got like typed out as a play. So it's like the monodrama that you will play as your mom, and you just kind of like read the list. This one was good, but the but is 13 different points, like bullet points. Like, thank you. Oh man.
But to be honest with you, it's that.
Go ahead.
It's like those are just kind of the beautiful kind of touches that, you know, here's family. Family does these things that sometimes they're unexpected and surprising, and they just leave a kind of resonance, a nice memory. And it sometimes overtakes a lot of the harder stuff that may have happened in the past. So there's some sense of full circle that comes along in it. So yeah.
And also Chosen Family does that. Don't count that out, because I'm making something and then kids just walk in, they're like 3-year-old twins, and they're like, Ninong, which is uncle, godfather in Tagalog, because one of the dad is Filipino, but he's like, Ninong, are you making hanbok for us? I'm like, I'm making teddy bear. Like, you should make hanbok for us. I'm like, sure. So I made it to them. They wore it once and took photo, and they're like, not wearing again. I'm like, oh, there goes my 18 hours of work, like measuring, cutting like fabric and like assemble it for you so you guys can wear it daily. And no, it was just a mere suggestion. But hey, same as my parents, like my mom would just walk into the room. I'm drawing like really dark thing. The last thing was like the hanging meat with naked lady when she walked in. So she kind of like, she quietly just like look at me and like look at my art, look at me, and walked out. And the next time she caught was like me making this one, and that was like early 2000s. So like it was before Ed Hardy was a thing and people started wearing like, you know, skull t-shirts. So my mom just kind of like quietly look at me, look at my baby skull, look at me, look at my baby skull, and just like walk back and then close the door. And like a week later, she kind of like sat me down with the cup of tea. And she was like, have you thought about painting something beautiful? I know you have capability of making like flower paintings and, you know, like use some bright colors. I'm like, Mom, I use bright colors too. Like, have you seen my last lady painting? It was all red. She's like, no. There's definitely a lot of white and black in there too, and you know, lady looked dead. So, and other thing looked dead. Like, well, also she asked me if I'm worshiping Satan, but I told her I'm too lazy to do it. Like, it seems like a lot of job, Mom. Like, I don't think I can worship any deities right now. And she's like, I'm not joking. But yeah, all the suggestions. Oh, speaking of devil, I think the
visitor
kid is knocking on the door.
I'm gonna take that knock as a invitation to go to the chat on YouTube, because we have a couple questions. So Justin Glosson is asking for all three. Given the state of America due to the pandemic, racism, and division, do you feel art will play a major role in rebuilding the American community for years to come, especially your art?
I mean, I know Santa Monica's doing like special program that is kind of inviting artists and help them economically and also like the local economy. And I think it gives us more time to kind of talk about different stories and connect those dots. Like, people just assume art is a thing that certain people do, and then just kind of, you know, you have to read like 50 pages essay about like how it became what it is. Like, that's how I felt about like a lot of theater works and also visual works too, because I'm like, I don't know, like I don't have any connections, like I feel lost even as an artist. Like, go to someone else's like exhibition, I'm just kind of like standing in front of this gorgeous work or watching someone like using body as a medium to like express something, and I'm like, I don't know, like I feel so like inadequate to be here in this place. But I think people will realize like it is just of, well, at least like for me, it is self-life. and it is of their story also like being told just through different like bodies and different way of expressing it. And I don't know, like that's my hope anyways, like during this pandemic, then people would be able to kind of see more visual things as popping on their screen at least, and then feel more comfortable and kind of more invited to enjoy these things. I don't know.
I say yes, yes, yes. And I say that because we are doing it. Artists are contributing to the art during this time period, during the pandemic, during the this tumultuous time, and also to create change and to heal. You know, there's always the presence of art. And as for me, as myself as an artist, as a Mexican queer immigrant artist, I am holding space to create and to be able to present ideas that can move us forward.
Yeah, I ditto that. I mean, I think art has always been a part of rebuilding and creating something new. And I think it's also, it's because we have to. I think that it's a process of survival. And so we are in times that are questioning our very survival. And I think we're grasping at all of our forms and genres, you know. And I think for me, I find myself filling up as much as possible on just countless forms of art, things that I don't practice, things that I do, you know. So absolutely, yeah.
Oh, and the crazy thing is, I got into more exhibition during pandemic time than any other time. It's like online exhibition going on, and I'm kind of like, oh, I just did the voice thing for your project, and you kind of count me in as part of your art, and now it's showing on like online shows, and then people feel more comfortable about gathering like minds and then kind of spend the time that we have now since the world slowed down to make a sense of community, like even stronger community. I mean, this talk is also giving me that, like, if it wasn't for, you know, like this conversation we're having right now, I would not meet you guys and like of different genres, or even like in seemingly like not in the same circle, but turned out Enrique has like 10 common friends with me on Facebook. But you know, it's just, you know, it's just wonderful to have the optimism that we have now as, you know, building, rebuilding, and, you know, kind of sharing all this conversation. So
I do want to add, because we are talking also about mental health, that, you know, I think all artists need to be allowed their own process. And I know that I, like very early on after lockdown, I was asked to be on a poetry event. And it was like, you know, it was something like, oh, I forget the name of the event, but it was, the gist of it was, you know, like the world is burning, you know, and, you know, the poet's response. And, you know, some of us at that point were just like, the world's on fire around us. We need time. You know, what's the poet doing? The poet is just taking it in like the rest of us, you know? And so I do think, like, I hope that for all the artists, you know, listening to this program, right, that people just like give themselves like permission to process and be on their own pace, because it's a lot of pressure, right? It's a lot of pressure to feel like, well, what's your response? Respond now. And sometimes it's like, well, I'm going to steer you to this thing that you should be looking at, you know, that's my job right now, you know? So, yeah, just everyone's going to be on a different pace with that.
Yeah, thank you. That's really important. Yeah, when I did the open call for home, I sent out some personal invitations as well. And I got a lot of people that wrote back to me and they're like, I can't produce. I haven't been producing. I have nothing to present you. And I think that was the reality check. We have another question from Anu and Nam. Would anyone have suggestions to mend broken relationships in immigrant families when they are ashamed of the offspring? Regarding gardening. Ashamed due to being an artist, shame regarding having a mental illness. Both seems to have problems in our communities. And Anu is, my understanding, Anu is South Asian.
I honestly couldn't. I still am looking for some kind of organization that might help, because personally I did not find any and yes, to especially say hey, I'm gonna study art, and your parents are excited about you taking anatomy class because they think you're gonna be a doctor, or they're excited about you taking philosophy class because they think you're gonna be a lawyer, and then tell them hey, it was for my requirements and I'm gonna be an artist, it will take time. At least for me, it is still a process. After 16 years of me trying to convince them that I can actually survive on this. So I think that's why it's so important for us in kind of older generation telling other folks it is obtainable lifestyle, you can live with this, and there's a different way that you can actually survive. I think that was my parents' main concern. It's so you're gonna be an artist, so you're gonna do a lot of drugs and get drunk, and then you sleep in the street, and then you wake up and you doodle on the wall, and then that was a quote, literally word to word quote from my mom, talking about my future, that she expects to be. I'm well, I don't know, but I know a lot of artists actually have jobs too. It could be desk job, but you are still an artist, and you are still making art. You are still going to openings. You are still submitting your work, and be just who you are. It's never gonna go away. So I think, at least we can start talking more about it's just.
I would like to add basically, because for my own experience, it was several years, because in the beginning it was really hard, my teen years. And then in between that time period, again, there was an absence. But as time passed, there's a sense of healing, a sense of understanding that came across from my own parents doing their own kind of search and doing their own kind of asking those questions as to, my son's gay, and being guided, luckily, by credible individuals, and then just still being connected in that, and being able to speak with them. And it's a dance: 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But it's wonderful at this moment to know that I'm there for them and be able to assist them in that. Again, having this big world change of thought, that before they were rejecting me based on very multiple things, to now being so loving and so accepting and so there. But if you want resources, one organization that I would recommend in regards to mental health would be the LA LGBT Center, the organization that you can also look up in the website, lalgbt.org, and look at the mental health services that are offered there. There are different services and health services that I would recommend for any family that is seeking answers or having to connect youth who are going through a hard time. This is an organization that can actually be tapped into. Look them up.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes left if anybody has any last comments. I want to thank each of you for being here and for being so vulnerable and candid and courageous. We talked about a lot, or actually, I didn't really talk about anything. You guys talked about a lot. Yeah, I want to thank each of you.
Thank you.
All right, well, can we see the cat again before I'm going to do a grounding. I think the cat is so important to help us ground.
I mean, I would just like to say thank you, for sharing this space, Nick, for bringing us together.
Thank you.
I feel like, we've talked a bit about chosen family throughout, like our prep call and today, and I'm like really grateful, especially in this Zoom era of when I get on a call and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's all like queer fam. There's something so extra comforting about that and necessary for me right now. And I think it's because I do have a lot of access to my family. My mom, I'm her principal, care support. And it's awesome and it's great. But I don't have as much access right now, like in person, to everyone else, and like, I don't know, just the queer family that I get to see and make anew.
Yeah.
Is really important. Really important.
I was just thinking, like, I can't wait till like everything is somehow settled down and I can go to like dress play and I'm just gonna be like incognito wearing mask or something and just kind of like quietly watching and then like I'm watching you. And then, like, at the end of the day, I'll just like show up in like your job or your events and I'll just kind of like hide behind someone and just kind of like look at your job. That's what he was talking about and just like running away, being creepy.
I want to see some teddy bears and some dildos.
Right?
Yes. Yes. Teddy bears and dildos. Put it in your plate too. Thank you.
Yeah, that's right. All three of us, or all four of us, are connecting from Los Angeles. So yeah. If it were a different time, we'd be in person, but it would be a different thing. Yeah. I'm kind of liking this Zoomness going on. All right.
So far, you're so close. So.
Yes.
Well, let's do the breaths again before we head out into the rest of our day. And then we will say goodbye to everyone who's been watching and commenting. Be bold, be brave. Thank you, Star Kim. Justin says, thank you all. This was very eye-opening and comforting with a big smiley face with teeth. Oh, Anu would put, yay, cultural food, heals all. All right, so find a space to sit comfortably. Put your back up straight. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. We'll do the 3 breaths, in through your nose and out through your mouth, then hold for 4. So first breath in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. In through your nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last one in through your nose, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and out through your mouth, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Happy Saturday. Thank you, everyone, for being
here. Too.
And say goodbye to
Thank you, guys.
Who tuned in live.
Thank you for watching us.
Thank you.
Thank you.